Imagine this, you have $650 million. Your bank knows, your lawyer knows, maybe your spouse knows, but your neighbors don't, your old college friends don't. The guy who serves your coffee every morning has no idea. You drive a normal car. You live in a normal-looking house. Nobody stops you on the street. Nobody recognizes your name. Nobody asks you for anything. You are technically one of the wealthiest people most people will never meet. This is the world of the silent millionaire, and in some cases, the silent billionaire. People whose net worth would put them on magazine covers, but who have deliberately built a life where almost nobody knows. In today's video, we're going deep on why some of the wealthiest people on earth choose to stay completely invisible. The actual legal and financial structures that make this kind of privacy possible. Real historical patterns of people who live this exact lifestyle. What daily life really looks like when you're this wealthy and this unknown. How this works differently across countries. And the surprising downsides that come with a fortune nobody can see. This is a longer, deeper breakdown than usual. So if topics like wealth, privacy, and how money really works behind the scenes interest you, make sure you're subscribed to Tom Explain Money. This is exactly the kind of content we cover every week. Let's get into it. Why wealthy people choose to stay invisible. You'd think that once someone builds enormous wealth, the natural next step is visibility. Magazine features, red carpets, a public profile. And for some, that's true. But for a surprising number of the ultra-wealthy, the opposite happened. They actively work to disappear. There are a few core reasons behind this. Reason 1. Safety and security. Publicly known wealth makes you a target for kidnapping threats, scams, lawsuits, and constant solicitation. Staying unknown removes an entire category of risk. Security consultants who work with high-net-worth families often say the single biggest protective measure isn't a gate or a guard. It's simply nobody knowing there's anything to protect. Reason 2. Protecting family and relationships. Many silent millionaires want their children to grow up grounded, without classmates or acquaintances treating them differently because of the family's net worth. Kids who grow up believing their family is comfortable, rather than extraordinarily wealthy, tend to develop very different relationships with money and other people. Reason 3. Avoiding constant requests. Once wealth becomes public knowledge, it invites an endless stream of requests. Investment pitches, loan requests, and distant relatives, or old acquaintances reconnecting suddenly out of nowhere, almost always asking for something. Reason 4. Genuine preference for a normal life. Some people, even after building extraordinary wealth, simply don't want the lifestyle that comes with public recognition. They'd rather blend and order coffee without being noticed, and live without the social performance that visible wealth often demands. Reason 5. Business leverage. In negotiations, buying property, acquiring a business, or investing in a private deal, being an unknown buyer often means better pricing. The moment a seller knows they're dealing with a known billionaire, prices tend to increase. Anonymity in this sense is also a financial strategy. The legal structures that make this possible. Now here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Because staying financially invisible isn't just a mindset. There are real, completely legal structures that make it possible. Structure 1. Trusts. A trust allows assets to be legally owned by an entity rather than an individual by name. Instead of a house or a company being tied directly to a person's name in public records, it's tied to the trust. Trusts are one of the most common tools used for both privacy and estate planning. They've been used by wealthy families for generations, long before modern tax planning even existed in its current form. Structure 2. LLCs and holding companies. Many silent millionaires don't own assets directly, they own them through a series of LLCs. A property, a business, or an investment might be publicly listed as owned by XYZ Holdings LLC, with no obvious link back to the actual person. Some structures go even further, using layered ownership, an LLC owned by another LLC, owned by a trust, making it extremely difficult for an outsider to trace. Structure 3. Anonymous or nominee ownership. In certain jurisdictions, ownership structures allow a nominee, often a lawyer or corporate service provider, to appear as the public-facing owner, while the real beneficial owner remains private, fully within legal boundaries. Structure 4. Family offices. Beyond a certain net worth, many wealthy families set up a private family office, essentially a private financial management firm that exists solely to manage one family's wealth quietly, away from banks or advisors who might otherwise leak information. Some family offices employ dozens of staff, accountants, lawyers, security consultant, and yet the family itself remains almost entirely unknown to the public. Structure 5. Geographic diversification. Spreading assets across multiple countries and jurisdictions makes it significantly harder for any single database journalist or public record to piece together the full picture of someone's wealth. A property in one country, a business stake in another, and investment accounts in a third rarely get cross-referenced by anyone outside a coordinated legal team. It's worth pausing here to say clearly these are legitimate, legal tools used every day by estate planners, business owners, and family offices. Privacy and tax evasion are two very different things, and this video is strictly about the legal side of staying unknown. If you're finding this breakdown useful, this is a great moment to hit subscribe. We go deep on how real wealth actually works, not just the surface-level advice. Real-world patterns, how this has played out historically. Throughout history, there have been well-documented cases of extremely wealthy individuals who deliberately avoided public attention. Looking at the patterns tells us a lot about how this lifestyle actually works. Some wealthy industrialists in the early to mid-1900s became famous specifically for the opposite reason for how reclusive they were, avoiding cameras, public events, and interviews entirely, despite controlling massive fortunes. Their names occasionally surfaced in business filings, but their day-to-day lives stayed almost completely private. In more recent decades, business journalists and researchers have repeatedly found that a large number of the world's wealthiest people are never featured on any public wealth ranking at all. Not because they aren't wealthy enough, but because their assets are structured in ways that make their true net worth essentially invisible to outside researchers. A common pattern researchers point to: the wealth doesn't sit in a bank account with a name attached. It sits across trusts, private companies, real estate holdings, and investment vehicles, each one individually unremarkable, but collectively worth an enormous fortune. What's interesting is that many of these individuals aren't hiding anything illegal at all. They're simply using entirely legal privacy tools, so thoroughly and so early that by the time they're extremely wealthy, there's no public trail to follow in the first place. There's also a generational pattern worth noting. First-generation wealth builders, people who created their fortune themselves, are often more visible, simply because building a business or making early investments naturally puts their name on documents, deals, and public records. It's the second and third generations, inheriting wealth that's already been structured through trusts and holding companies, who tend to be the truly invisible ones. By the time wealth passes down 2 or 3 generations, it's often been so thoroughly restructured that the family name barely appears anywhere connected to the actual asset. This is part of why financial researchers often say that real, old wealth is far quieter than new wealth. New money tends to announce itself: a new business, a public deal, a visible lifestyle change. Old multi-generational wealth has usually had decades to disappear into structures that were built specifically to make it disappear. A day in the life, what it actually looks like. So what does it actually feel like to live this way day to day? Let's paint a realistic picture. Mornings look ordinary. Many silent millionaires deliberately drive modest cars, live in unassuming homes, and avoid any visible markers of wealth. No flashy watches, no name brand obsession, nothing that draws a second look. Some intentionally choose neighborhoods where nobody would expect this level of wealth to exist. Spending happens quietly. Big purchases of property, a business stake, an investment are made through entities, advisors, and trusts, never in a way that creates a public paper trail back to their name. Even smaller purchases are often handled with intentional plainness, using regular cards, regular stores, regular routines. Relationships require constant discretion. Most silent millionaires are extremely selective about who knows the full picture of their finances, often limiting it to a spouse, 1 or 2 advisors, and immediate family. Even close friendships are often maintained without the other person ever knowing the true scale of their wealth. Decisions are made slowly and privately. Without public pressure, board scrutiny, or media attention, decisions can be made purely based on long-term strategy, not optics or public perception. Professional interactions stay layered. Meetings often happen through lawyers, family office staff, or advisors rather than the individual directly. This adds another buffer between the person and any public visibility. The psychological cost. But there's a real psychological cost. Living this way often means constant awareness, being careful in conversations, avoiding certain topics, watching what gets said at dinner parties, sometimes feeling genuinely isolated because so few people actually know who you really are. Some who've spoken about this lifestyle anonymously describe a persistent low-level tension, the sense of always managing a secret, even in relationships they otherwise trust. Hobbies and social life. Even hobbies and social life require planning. Joining a club, attending an event, or even dating someone new all come with an added layer of consideration. How much do you reveal, and when? Many silent millionaires develop simple, rehearsed answers to deflect questions about their work or income, without ever technically lying, just redirecting the conversation elsewhere. Travel is handled differently too, rather than flying privately, which draws attention at small airports. Many silent millionaires deliberately fly commercially. They book mid-range hotels under trust or LLC names, and avoid any travel pattern that would stand out to an observant onlooker. How this differs across countries. Privacy laws and financial secrecy work very differently depending on where you are in the world. This shapes how the silent millionaire lifestyle actually plays out. In some countries, corporate registries are highly transparent. Company ownership is public record. This makes it much harder to stay anonymous through a simple LLC alone. In these places, trusts and more complex layered structures become far more important. In other jurisdictions, known historically for financial privacy, ownership information has traditionally been much harder for outsiders to access. This is why certain regions became popular for family offices and holding structures decades ago. International regulation has been tightening. In recent years, many countries have introduced beneficial ownership registries, requiring companies to disclose who actually owns them, even if that information isn't fully public. This has made pure anonymity significantly harder to achieve than it was a generation ago. It has pushed many silent millionaires toward more sophisticated, layered, and legally complex structures instead of simple anonymity. The overall trend globally has been toward more transparency, not less, meaning this silent millionaire lifestyle today requires far more careful, professional structuring than it did even 15 or 20 years ago. The surprising downsides of staying invisible. It's easy to assume this lifestyle is all upside: safety, privacy, peace of mind. But there are real trade-offs. Downside 1. Isolation. When almost nobody knows the truth about your finances, it becomes difficult to be fully open with people, even those close to you. This can create genuine loneliness. Some describe a persistent feeling of being unable to fully relax around anyone outside a very small circle. Downside 2. Missed opportunities. Visibility often brings opportunities, partnerships, introductions, credibility in business circles. Staying hidden can mean quietly walking away from doors that would otherwise open, simply because nobody knows there's an opportunity to offer in the first place. Downside 3. Complexity and cost. Maintaining trusts, holding companies, and family offices isn't free. It requires ongoing legal and financial management, which itself takes time, money, and critically trust in the people managing it. The more layered the structure, the more people are involved, and the more that privacy ultimately depends on those people staying quiet. Downside 4. The fear of discovery. For some, there's a constant low-level anxiety about the structure ever being exposed. Through a lawsuit, a data leak, a disgruntled former employee, or simply someone putting the pieces together. Large-scale document leaks in the past have shown just how quickly decades of carefully built privacy can unravel. Downside 5. Succession becomes complicated. Passing this kind of wealth on to the next generation, while maintaining the same level of privacy, adds another layer of complexity. Heirs need to understand structures they didn't build, often without ever being able to discuss them openly with anyone outside the family. What this means for everyday investors. Here's the honest truth. You don't need $650 million to apply the principles behind this lifestyle. Lesson 1. Privacy-conscious habits. Privacy-conscious habits like not broadcasting your finances on social media apply at every wealth level. They protect you from social pressure, scams, and unnecessary risks. This is genuinely one of the simplest, most accessible lessons from this entire topic. Lesson 2. Basic legal structures. Basic legal structures like an LLC for a small business or rental property are accessible to regular investors too, not just the ultra-wealthy. They can offer real liability protection at a fraction of the complexity used by billion-dollar family offices. Lesson 3. Living below your means. Living below your means, regardless of your actual net worth, is one of the most consistent habits found among genuinely wealthy people, visible or invisible. Many silent millionaires built their fortunes precisely because they never felt the need to visibly display it along the way. Lesson 4. Discretion in relationships. Discretion in relationships, being thoughtful about who you share financial details with, protects ordinary people from awkward loan requests and strained friendship, just as much as it protects the ultra-wealthy from far bigger risk. The core lesson from the silent millionaire lifestyle isn't secrecy for its own sake. It's intentional control over how your wealth is seen, used, and protected, at whatever scale that wealth happens to be. So, you have $650 million, nobody knows. It's not just an interesting hypothetical, it's a real, deliberate lifestyle that some of the wealthiest people on earth have chosen, using entirely legal tools available to build genuine privacy around their fortune. And as we've seen, it comes with a real trade-off: safety and control on one side, isolation and complexity on the other. Whether you ever reach that level of wealth or not, the underlying principles, discretion, legal protection, and intentional living are lessons anyone can apply, starting today at whatever level your finances are at right now. If this video gave you a new perspective, hit that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Tom Explain Money. We break down how money really works at every level, from everyday budgeting to the strategies of the ultra-wealthy. Drop a comment below. Would you want to be a silent millionaire, or would you rather the world know? Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.